All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Annabelle Potter presiding. Docket number 25001, the State versus John Edward Trent, robbery in the first degree. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, today the court will hear State versus Trent. Is the prosecution ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Counselors, please state your names for the record.
Dave Barrett, representing the state.
Brian Reynolds, representing the defendant, John Trent.
We will begin with opening statements, followed by the prosecution calling the witnesses. Jurors, the only evidence you are to consider is from the testimony of the witnesses. You are not to consider opening statements, any questions asked by the attorneys, or the closing arguments as part of the evidence in this case. The prosecution may proceed with its opening statement.
Today you will hear evidence that will prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant, John Trent, committed armed robbery. The evidence shows that the defendant went into a convenience store with a gun, threatened the store clerk, and robbed the store of $280. You will hear testimony from the only eyewitness present at the time of the crime, Jane Smith. Ms. Smith saw the defendant commit the crime, and she identified Mr. Trent in a lineup soon after the crime occurred. Her testimony will prove that Mr. Trent is, without a doubt, the culprit. You will also hear testimony from the police officer, Barry Brown, who arrested the defendant. Officer Brown found the defendant in a bar without an alibi, carrying a lot of cash immediately following the crime. Officer Brown arrested the defendant after he was identified by Ms. Smith in the lineup.
The defense may proceed with its opening statement.
Today, I will prove to you that there is a lot of reasonable doubt in the prosecution's case. The only evidence brought by the prosecution is that of a scared victim, Mrs. Smith, and a suspicious police officer, Barry Brown. You will also hear testimony from the defendant, John Trent, who will testify that he was nowhere near the convenience store at the time of the robbery.
Prosecution, please call your first witness.
The prosecution calls Jane Smith.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. And now,
Please state your name for the record.
my name is Jane Eliza Smith.
Ms. Smith, what do you do for a living?
I work as the night manager at a 24-hour convenience store in the neighborhood, the Stop and Shop. I've worked there for several years.
And what happened on the night of January 5th?
I was working at my job. I was the only one working there that night. About 1:15 a.m., a man came in.
What did he look like?
He was about 5'8" inches tall with brown hair, average build. He was wearing a red t-shirt. He had some kind of tattoo peeking out from under the sleeve of the t-shirt. It was a dragon or a snake or something with a tail.
What happened next?
After he walked around the store for about 5 minutes, he came up to the cash register. He smelled like beer. He was carrying a gun, and he said, "Give me the money."
And what did you do?
I just stood there in shock until he pointed the gun at me and repeated, "Give me the money." I opened the drawer and I gave him the money. Before I did that, I pressed the alarm button under the counter that contacts the police. That's what they told us to do if we were ever robbed. I was shaken when I gave him the cash. Then he just ran out of the store and down the street.
How long did all of this take?
I'd say the whole thing took about a minute.
How much money did the robber take?
About $280. It was about $280 in mixed bills in the register.
How do you know he took $280?
I figured it was $280 because I sold large amounts of liquor to a group of men that came in about 20 minutes before that. They bought kegs that were about $100, and then there was the regular business of the night, which was about $80. And I knew that there was already $100 in the drawer when I started my shift because I counted first thing.
What happened next?
After the robber left, I called the police to make sure they were on their way. And when they got there, they asked me to tell them what had happened, to describe the robber. And then the next day, the police called me at my home and they said they had a suspect in custody. So I went to the police station and I was asked to identify the man who robbed me in a lineup. I identified the defendant. I knew right away which one he was.
So you were very confident that you picked the right person out of the lineup?
Yes, I was very confident in the choice I made in the lineup.
Is the man that robbed you in the courtroom today?
Yes, he's sitting right over there by the defense attorney.
The defendant?
Yes, the defendant.
How confident are you that the defendant, John Trent, is the man who robbed you at the store on January 5th?
I'm very confident. I don't think I'd forget the face of a man who held out a gun in front of me.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I have no further questions.
Defense, do you wish to cross-examine this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Smith, is it normal that you work by yourself late at night?
During the week, I work alone, but on the weekends, there's usually another employee there with me.
How are you feeling that night?
Fine.
Tired?
Well, I'd only started working a few hours by the time of the robbery, so I wasn't really tired, and I'm used to working at night as well. I work the night shift.
Is this the first time you have ever been the victim of an armed robbery?
Yes.
You said you felt that you were shocked, so you were scared.
Well, yes, I was scared. I've never been in that kind of situation before.
You were so shocked and scared that you were unable to respond initially.
No, it took me a second to realize what was going on, but I really didn't hesitate to respond.
So you are telling us that even with a gun pointed to your face, you didn't freeze just a little bit?
Well, I did a little, but I pressed the button and I called the police. I was afraid, but I was able to do everything that I had been trained to do in that situation. I was paying attention and I know what I saw.
So you say that you were paying attention, but when it came to details about the robber, you were not clear. You were able to notice that the person has a tattoo, but you are unable to tell us what the picture of the tattoo was, correct?
Well, as far as the picture of the tattoo, I couldn't really see all of it, so I can't say anything more about it except that it had a tail. I only saw the bottom, but I did see that it had a tail, and I know it was green.
How far away from the subject were you?
About 3 or 4 feet when he approached the counter. When he was walking around the back of the store, I would say he was about 20 feet away.
He was about 20 feet away then at the back of the store. Was he in plain view or was he walking behind the shelves and displays?
Well, yes, there's several high displays at the back, and he walked around them before he came up to the counter.
What were you doing when he came into the store?
I was restocking items behind the counter.
So you were not focused solely on him as he came in and started walking around the back of the store?
No, I noticed he was there, and when he walked around, I didn't pay much attention to him because at that point he was just like any other customer, but I certainly focused on him when he approached the counter.
And you testified that the person ran off down the street. Are you able to tell in which direction he ran, or were you too upset to tell?
Well, my first instinct was to call 911, so I saw him run towards the door, but I can't really say which way he went.
Regarding the money, you said you figured there was $280 in the drawer when you were robbed. Had you made a cash count of the drawer throughout the night?
Before I started my shift, I was given $75, as I always am, and then throughout the night, I'm not supposed to allow more than $200 in the drawer, so I make cash drops throughout the night. And I did a cash count at the beginning of the night, so I know that there was about $100.
If you're not allowed to have more than $200 in the drawer, then how could the robber have taken $280?
Well, I was really busy at the start of my shift, and I just did not have time to make a cash drop.
Did you have time to do a cash count at any point during the shift?
Only that first time, like I said. It was a busy night.
Then do you know for sure that there was $280 in the drawer?
No, not for sure, but it was close.
You said the police responded. How long did it take them to get to the store?
About 15 minutes before they got there, I'd say.
When the man spoke to you, was his speech slurred at all?
Well, I couldn't really say because all he said was, give me the money over and over. I mean, from that, I guess you couldn't say that his speech sounded slurred.
When you were brought to the station, what did the lineup look like?
Well, they all had similar hair color and the same height, and I think most of them had some kind of snake or dragon-like tattoo. Some of them had a bandage on their arms. I couldn't tell what was under there, a tattoo or whatever.
Was anything said to you before you identified the suspect?
Yes, the police told me they had a suspect in custody.
Did you feel any pressure to pick someone out because you were told they had someone in custody?
I felt some pressure, but I'm not going to pick someone just because they say they have a suspect. Like I said, I knew it was him right away.
Okay, Mrs. Smith. Thank you very much for your time. No further questions.
Prosecution, call your next witness.
The prosecution calls Officer Brown.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Officer Barry Edward Brown.
Officer Brown, what is your experience with this case?
I was the officer who responded to the Stop and Shop on January 5th when Miss Smith called to report the robbery.
What did you do when you arrived at the store?
I took down her description of the incident and the robber.
What did you do next?
Since Miss Smith said the robber smelled like beer and ran out in the direction of the bar down the block, I decided to see if anyone fitting the description was at the bar or had been seen at the bar that night. I went over to O'Neill's. I took a look around. By then it was about 2:30 a.m. I saw a man fitting the description given by Miss Smith in the back room where the pool tables were, who was wearing a red T-shirt. He also had a tattoo on his arm. I started asking him a few questions. He was obviously drunk and got a little angry. This made me suspicious, so I searched him and I found $230 in his pocket.
And what did you do next?
Well, I thought this was enough to take him down to the station for questioning. Another officer took him in while I questioned people in the bar. The bartender had seen him earlier in the evening, around 9 p.m. He had bought a few beers and went into the back room to play pool. The bar got busy, so the bartender said he didn't see the defendant until much later, around 1:30 a.m. None of the other patrons in the bar could say when the defendant arrived at the bar, if he was with anyone, or if he ever left the bar during the evening. Then I looked around the bar a little bit more. The back room, the pool table was off to the side, out of the view of the bartender and most of the patrons. There was a door in that room that led into an alley behind the bar. The alley leads out into the street that the bar and the convenience store are on. I went out the door and saw some trash cans. I looked in the trash cans. I found a gun matching the description given by Miss Smith. It didn't have any fingerprints on it, but it was definitely left there sometime that day because the trash was picked up earlier that morning.
What happened after that?
I went back to the station to talk to Trent. He denied any involvement in the robbery and gave us the name of a man, Jack, who he claimed he had been playing pool with all night. We searched for a man and any witnesses that might have seen him. No one we talked to remembered the man Trent described. We were unable to find him. His drunkenness, lack of confirmable alibi led us to keep him overnight for identification lineup in the morning.
Tell us a little bit about the lineup.
Well, the next morning I rounded up some people who looked like Trent to put in a lineup with him. I made sure all the lineup members were wearing the same red T-shirt. All of them had some sort of tattoo on their arm. When Miss Smith came into the station, I told her that we had a suspect. In the identification room, I told her she could pick out the person who robbed her store. Smith identified Trent. Then I arrested Trent for robbery in the first degree.
Did you have any suspects for the robbery other than the defendant?
No, we did not.
Thank you, Officer Brown. I have no further questions.
Defense, do you wish to cross-examine this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. How did the witness, Ms. Smith, appear when you first approached her? What was her emotional state?
She was shaken up, but otherwise she had a good disposition considering she'd just been robbed.
But she was visibly shaken by the incident.
Yes, as you'd expect in that situation, sure.
Let's talk a little bit about your investigation. Is it fair to say that the street the Stop and Shop is on is a busy street that is mostly commercial?
Yes.
Is O'Neill's the only bar on this crowded street?
No, there are others.
Is it the only establishment that serves liquor on this busy commercial street?
No, there are a couple other places further down the road, but O'Neill's is the town favorite, the most crowded.
Is O'Neill's the only bar you looked at in your investigation?
Yes, we found a suspect and a gun at the scene. I felt there was no need to spend more man-hours looking at various bars or liquor establishments that were further away.
Is it safe to say that a red t-shirt is not an unusual or distinctive article of clothing to wear?
No, a red t-shirt isn't a particularly unusual dress.
Was there anyone else in the bar that night wearing a red shirt?
Yes, there were two others wearing red shirts, but Trent was the only one wearing a red shirt who had a tattoo on his arm.
Why did you get suspicious when the suspect got angry?
None of the questions I asked him so far accused him of anything.
So Mr. Trent told you he had been playing pool with a man named Jack and his friends. Did you ask anyone in the bar if they had seen Jack and his friends?
I talked to some of the regulars and the bartender, and they had not seen or heard of this Jack or his friends. The bartender never remembered anyone matching Jack's description coming up to get a beer.
How do you know which patrons are regulars or not?
I usually do a sweep through the place on my shift just to check and make sure everything's okay. It's a busy place and incidents do occur there, so I get to know who frequents the bar.
You said you rounded up people who looked like Mr. Trent for the lineup the next day. How did you decide if they looked like him or not?
I found other people who looked similar to our suspects so he wouldn't stand out. We had to find people with tattoos because that was an important part of the witness's description. And we put them all in red shirts so they all would look similar.
Who conducted the lineup?
I did, but another officer was there.
Did you tell Ms. Smith when she was presented with the lineup that the real culprit may not be present or that she should not feel compelled to make an identification from that lineup?
No. I told her to tell us if she saw the person who robbed the store. I never told her she had to pick someone out.
So you told Mrs. Smith you had a suspect.
Yes.
Would that make someone believe that the suspect was in the lineup?
I don't know.
Well, in your experience, would it make a witness more likely to pick someone out of the lineup if he or she thought you had a suspect?
Like I said, we told her we had a suspect, but she was always had the right to say she didn't see the man in the lineup. We did not force her to choose. She chose the defendant all by herself.
Thank you, Officer Brown. No further questions.
Defense, please call your first witness.
The defense calls John Trent.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Please state your name for the record.
John Trent.
What were you doing on January 5th, the night of the robbery?
Well, I wasn't robbing the convenience store. I was at O'Neill's all night.
What happened while you were at O'Neill's that night?
I went down to O'Neill's at around 9 p.m. and it was crowded. I bought a beer and then went into the back room with the pool table. There was a guy playing pool in there by himself. I never saw him before. He said his name was Jack. So I asked him if he wanted to play a game. He said sure. I racked the balls while Jack got himself a beer. And we played pool and drank beer for a few hours.
How did you do?
Pretty well. We played for 40 bucks a game. I ended up winning about 200 bucks from the games.
How long did you and Jack play pool together?
Around 3 hours, maybe a little longer. Jack left at about 1:30 in the morning with some friends of his that I didn't know.
Did you talk to anyone else at the bar that night?
No, I talked to the bartender when I first got there and bought a beer. I didn't talk to anyone on the way to the pool room. I was in the pool room all night because Jack kept getting beers for us. No one else came into the pool room to talk to us, and I never went to the bar myself while we were playing.
Could anyone see you in the pool room?
I don't know. You can't really see the pool room from the bar.
What did you do next?
After Jack left, I went to the bar to get some more beer. After I was sitting there for a while, Officer Brown came in and started asking me questions about the robbery. I told him I didn't rob the store, that I was just playing pool in the back room.
What happened next?
Well, he searched me and took my money. I wanted to cooperate, so when he asked me to go down to the station with him, I went. I told them about Jack and that he would tell them I was playing pool all night. I kept telling him I didn't do it, but they arrested me anyway.
Thank you, John. I have no further questions.
Prosecution.